यदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरो वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजाता सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्यदेव श्रीराधा कृष्णपदा सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्त श्रीराधाकान्त नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्रीराधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mangalam Mataji. Welcome all the devotees in this first session on our last course book for Bhakti Shastri, Nectar of Instruction, Shri Upadeshamrut. So today we will cover, as part of this discussion, overview of Upadeshamrut plus the chapter number 1, which is understanding the various urges, demands of the body, 6 urges, which Srila Rupa Goswami mentions, and various ways through Krishna consciousness process to deal with these 6 urges. So before we start, I just want to do a quick check. Did you get a chance to take a quick look through the preface and chapter number 1 of Nectar of Devotion? If yes, then we can ask few questions, not exactly to test the particular point, but to get an overview. What is the most important point you felt as part of reading the preface and chapter 1, text 1 of Upadeshamrut? So Murli Prabhu, thank you Prabhuji for going through these too. So would you like to mention any specific point, Murli Prabhu, that you found most prominent or coming out from Srila Prabhupada's presentation of the preface and text 1 purport? If you are comfortable to unmute, Murli Prabhu, or you can put it on the chat if you have a noisy background. All right. Gurunishta Mataji, would you like to mention any specific points that came out prominently from the preface and text 1?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, I read the preface and I can share some understanding that I got. Sorry. Deshamrit, the Nectar of Instructions, is given to us by Sri Rup Goswami, the topmost Goswami, the leader of the Goswamis, for us neophyte devotees. And the goal is for us to become better pure Vaishnavas, at least better Vaishnavas, if not pure, so that we can follow the process of Krishna consciousness, which is given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the highest gopi. And as Vaishnavas and Rupanugas, we are expected to become Goswamis, to control our senses. All of us are expected to do that and not just get swayed with the modes of the nature, and that way reach Sattvagun. And Sattvagun is self-care, care for our body, mind, soul. So we follow these instructions and he kind of spells it out for us. We just need to follow, and it becomes easier to follow the process given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Prabhupada.
Yes, thank you, Guru Nishtha Mataji. So you mentioned various points. First, very important point you mentioned is Srila Rupa Goswami has given us various ways to understand the urges and how to control those urges and how to bring oneself to the platform of Sattva Gun, to the platform of goodness. We see in Bhagavad Gita, in the 3rd unit of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has devoted a major part of unit 3 for us to understand the 3 modes of material nature. And the discussion goes very much in detail to understand the qualities within those 3 modes, typical actions that result as a result of being situated in a particular mode of material nature, and what is the destination. And Krishna mentions in the beginning of this particular unit, at the beginning of chapter 14, how so many great personalities and the sages and the saintly persons have utilized this knowledge of the 3 modes of material nature to extricate oneself, to get out, to take one out of the clutches of material nature and transcend to the spiritual world. So before this 3rd unit of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has described in detail the process of Bhakti Yoga, including knowledge of Krishna's energies, knowledge about Krishna's opulences, his Vishwarupa, universal form, and the core qualities of Bhakti Yoga, which endear one to Lord Krishna. So after describing all these very core content and understanding of Bhakti Yoga, Krishna comes to this knowledge of the 3 modes of material nature, which is very, very important for a practicing devotee. Just understanding bhakti is not sufficient enough. Understanding with the help of this bhakti, how do we bring up ourselves to a higher platform? Firstly, to the platform of mode of goodness, and from mode of goodness to the platform of Shuddha Sattva, pure goodness, devotional service. We understand the 3rd unit. So similarly, the instructions for the practical day-to-day conduct of our devotional service, what should be done, what should not be done, for us to be elevated to this platform of goodness, have been given here by Srila Rupa Goswami. Sujata Mataji, Hare Krishna, please unmute yourself.
And I was just going to say the goal of life was to become a Goswami. That was
Goswami,
what was the
yes.
start of the definition of Goswami was given.
Yes,
So
yes,
that
Mataji.
is the level we need to achieve.
And what is the meaning of Goswami that Srila Prabhupada gives?
He's the one who controls the senses, master of his senses, and not the slave to the senses, not the Godasa. Should be Goswami.
Yes, thank you, Mataji. So this breakdown of the word-to-word meaning was also shared by Murli Prabhu, that Go Dasa, Go means the senses and Dasa means the servant or the slave of the senses. So instead of becoming a Go Dasa, a devotee, a practicing devotee is required to become Goswami if we want to advance in our spiritual life and reach the perfection. We will see some more comments by Srila Prabhupada, and also some more comments that Srila Prabhupada quotes from his own spiritual master, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, to explain this importance of controlling the senses, why it is so important. Any other point, any other devotees would like to mention before we start with going through the deep dive? Any other devotees got a chance to go through the preface and text 1? So that these discussions are more fruitful and you are able to contribute actively as part of the group discussion. Otherwise, the discussions will remain very generic based on our overall understanding of Krishna consciousness without fully diving deep into the points given by Srila Rupa Goswami. So let's try to visit these chapters, and these are very small chapters. Like one chapter to go through, it would probably take maximum 15 to 20 minutes, even if you were to just scan through it. And most of these points are quite familiar based on the classes we have heard, based on our existing reading of Srila Prabhupada's books, so that we don't give insights which are very generic. We can give specific examples which Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Prabhupada have taught us through this discussion. Hare Krishna. So we proceed the lesson plan. So similar to what we had done at the beginning of Nectar of Devotion, we went through understanding the significance of the 6 Goswamis, specific position of Srila Rupa Goswami for the followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And this we had covered in brief, so this should be quick. What is contribution of Srila Rupa Goswami to the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and the importance of his teachings for all the followers of the Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Gaudiya, the terminology comes from the word Gauda Desh, which in traditional terms, it meant the region of Bengal, which constitutes modern day West Bengal and Bangladesh and Odisha. So Bengal and Odisha together, they were called as Gauda Desh. What is Srila Prabhupada's purpose and intent in presenting the nectar of instruction? So mistakenly, I have typed here devotion. It should be nectar of instruction. Then the overview of nectar of instruction, Upadeshamrut, how the various verses, various texts of Upadeshamrut can be broken down, and how are we going to cover them as part of the 5 sessions on NOI. Then we will have the group activity, taking one particular statement by Srila Prabhupada in the preface of Nectar of Instruction, which has been quoted by many devotees in many of the classes. This is a very important statement. Srila Prabhupada himself has used it in many of the classes. Advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. So we'll deep dive into this. What does Srila Prabhupada mean, and how we can see it through some practical examples. Then we will go through text 1 of Nectar of Instruction, reciting the Sanskrit text, the meaning, and what are the different types of urges, demands of the body that have been given by Srila Rupa Goswami, and ways through Krishna consciousness process to deal with them. And then we will see the conclusion, some of the quotations by Srila Prabhupada from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur on the importance of controlling these urges as given by Srila Rupa Goswami. And then we will conclude today's discussion with a group activity, breakout room discussion, that based on our understanding of the various urges and the ways to deal with them, what is, present a very brief presentation on what are the artificial inappropriate means to control these urges, and how these solutions have their own limitations, and how Krishna consciousness as a holistic approach allows a very foolproof method to deal with these urges. And then we conclude our session. We have the shloka memorization from the Nectar of Devotion for the devotees who are ready. Sure, noted Chaitanya Katha Prabhuji. Okay, so let's begin. So Srila Rupa Goswami, whenever we recite the Mangalacharan prayers, as we did just a while ago, we offer our respects to Srila Rupa Goswami after offering one's respects to one's spiritual master. We chant Sri Chaitanya Mano Abhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale, that he is the personality who brought to this world Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mood and mission. To establish Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mood and mission, Sthapitam Yena Bhutale, to establish it on this earthly planet, Bhutala, Srila Rupa Goswami was specifically chosen by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swa Padantikam, that Srila Rupa Goswami, when he will give his shelter and mercy of his lotus feet to me, Swayam Rupa Kadamayam, when he himself will offer this shelter to me, Dadati Swa Padantikam, shelter at his lotus feet. So this is the prayer that we offer. And very briefly, like I have not included all the slides that were already presented as part of NOD introduction, but devotees can go through it, where Srila Prabhupada in his classes mentions in very details how this Krishna conscious mission, Krishna consciousness movement came about from the inspiration of Srila Rupa Goswami's teachings and his writings. In fact, this term itself, Krishna consciousness, was coined from the term Krishna Bhavnamrit from Srila Rupa Goswami's own composition. If I am not wrong, that composition is entitled Padyavali. So Srila Prabhupada took this particular term from Srila Rupa Goswami's composition and made it into English, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So this Rupa Goswami's position can be further understood by some of the quotations from Srila Prabhupada's writings. From Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is mentioned, Vrindavaniyam rasakeli vartam kalena luptam nija shaktim utkaha sancharya rupe vyatanota punah sa prabhur vidhau prag ivaloka srishtim. The Lord, being anxious to revive the Vrindavan pastimes of Lord Krishna, impregnated the heart of Rupa Goswami with spiritual potency. By this potency, Srila Rupa Goswami could revive the activities of Krishna in Vrindavan, activities almost lost to memory. In this way, he spread Krishna consciousness throughout the world. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 19:1. So here, Shri Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is writing and Srila Prabhupada is explaining how one of the core missions given by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the 6 Goswamis was to excavate the places of pastimes of Sri Radha and Krishna, and then to take the essence of all Vedic literatures and present it in the form for the devotees to come to practically apply those principles in our life. And they also established various deities in the prominent temples in Sri Vrindavan, and also established the process of proper deity worship of Radha and Krishna. So these have been some of their main contributions in fulfilling this mission of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Srila Prabhupada writes, the leader of these Goswamis, 6 Goswamis, was considered Srila Rupa Goswami. Of course, don't take it literally, because even amongst the 6 Goswamis, you will find that Srila Sanatan Goswami was the senior most, and Srila Rupa Goswami accepted Srila Sanatan Goswami as his own spiritual master. But in terms of the overall contribution to the Vaishnava literature, we are called as Rupa Anugas, which means the followers of Srila Rupa Goswami. There are few more quotations by Srila Prabhupada. Shri Rupa Hruday Prabhu Shakti Sancharila Sarva Tattva Nirupane Pravina Karila. By entering the heart of Rupa Goswami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu empowered him to ascertain properly the conclusions of all truths. He made him an experienced devotee whose decisions correctly agreed with the verdicts of the disciplic succession. Thus, Sri Rupa Goswami was personally empowered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we see that in the life of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he himself did not present in very much detail the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, except for the 8 verses which were, composed in the final days of his pastimes, not even composed, which were spoken out by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and noted down by the devotees, which came to be known as Shishtashtakam, the 8 verses, the 8 stanzas. Rest, all the knowledge of devotional service he gave through his intimate associates and devotees, specifically Srila Rupa Goswami, who he elaborately explained the principles of Bhakti Yoga at Dashashwamedh Ghat in Prayag, in Allahabad, in Prayagraj. And similarly, he also gave the instructions on Bhakti Yoga principles to Srila Rupa Goswami's elder brother, Srila Sanatan Goswami. And through these associates of him, and also it is explained through his South India tour, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically empowered Srila Ramananda Rai also to elaborately explain the principles of bhakti. So through all these associates, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu fulfilled the, and gave the message from the core of his heart through his devotees by empowering them. Priya Swarupe Daita Swarupe Prema Swarupe Sahajabhirupe Nijanurupe Prabhur Ekarupe Tatana Rupe Swavilasa Rupe. Indeed, Srila Rupa Goswami, whose dear friend was Swarupa Damodar, was the exact replica of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he was very, very dear to the Lord. Being the embodiment of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's ecstatic love, Rupa Goswami was naturally very beautiful. He very carefully followed the principles enunciated by the Lord, and he was a competent person to explain properly the pastimes of Lord Krishna. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu extended his mercy to Srila Rupa Goswami just so he could render service by writing transcendental literatures. This is again quoted from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela 19:1-1. So all these Goswamis, they have been mentioned in one of the book composed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's dear devotee, Sri Narahari Sarkar. The book is named Gauda Ganodasha Deepika, where he mentions the positions of all these devotees of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the eternal pastimes of Sri Radha and Krishna, where Sri Rupa Goswami is mentioned as Sri Rupa Manjari. So these Manjaris, they are the, so we see first Srimati Radharani is the topmost gopi and dear devotee of Lord Krishna, the topmost devotee. And to assist Srimati Radharani, we have Ashta Sakhis. And to assist these Ashta Sakhis, we have a group of 6 Manjaris, prominent Manjaris. So who are young girls in the Vrindavan who are eternally engaged in serving the assistance of Srimati Radharani, the Ashta Sakhis. So amongst these 6 Manjaris, Sri Rupa Goswami is Sri Rupa Manjari. Similarly, for other Goswamis also, Srila Narahari Sarkar has given their eternal positions in Radha Krishna pastime. So they are very, very special souls. They are not the personalities of this material world, but coming from the spiritual world just to assist the mission of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Yeah, so this is the book that is quoted, Sri Gauda Ganodasha Deepika. Yeah, and as we discussed a while ago, that all of us, the practicing devotees in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, are known as Rupanugas. This is the term we will also see coming in as part of the overall Mangalacharan prayers to explain the meaning. So Rupa means Srila Rupa Goswami, Anuga means the followers. So Rupanuga means the followers of Srila Rupa Goswami. And Srila Prabhupada writes that because, actually mentions as part of his lecture, that Rupa Goswami carried the mood and mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we follow our predecessor, which is Srila Rupa Goswami, to understand this mood and mission. And in the prayers to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, we also chant Namaste Gauravani Shri Murta Edina Tarine Rupanuga Viruddha Apasiddhanta Dvanta Harine. That Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was also a Rupanuga, the follower of Srila Rupa Goswami, who strongly dismissed and defeated the Apasiddhantas, any misinterpretation of the teachings which were contradictory to the teachings of Srila Rupa Goswami. So that is also one of the glorification of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Srila Prabhupada writes, this Krishna consciousness movement is being conducted under the supervision of Srila Rupa Goswami. Now, I won't repeat the one particular episode from Srila Prabhupada's life, but you can read through at your leisure. There is a very beautiful incident of Srila Rupa Goswami personally giving audience to Srila Prabhupada, and this has been witnessed by one Goswami family who were the residents of Sri Radha Damodar temple, and specifically narrated by Sri Gopal Chand Goswami, who was a child at that point in time, around 12 to 13 years old. So this is a very wonderful incident for us to gain faith in the position of our founder Acharya and understand in principle how did he inherit, how he was personally guided by Srila Rupa Goswami to preach Krishna consciousness in the West, and how he was assured all support and empowerment by all the Goswamis. So this link we can share separately, but it will take a very long time to discuss it. So you can read at your leisure. So what is Srila Prabhupada's intent and purpose in writing this Upadeshamrit? This is a very, very important point before we begin diving deep into the Upadeshamrit verses. Why Srila Prabhupada presented very few specific books. So as Srila Prabhupada writes in the preface, there are many other books written by Srila Rupa Goswami. Like he mentions about Vidagdha Madhav, Lalit Madhav, Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, Upadeshamrit, and so on and so forth. We also see there is Laghu Bhagavatamrita, which is written by Srila Rupa Goswami. So out of all these books, Srila Prabhupada knew that he has very limited time with him on this earth because of his advanced age. So he first wanted to take those books which he considered most important for the practicing devotees, and Sri Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu and Upadeshamrit are two of these. So would any devotee like to volunteer to read some of these points by Srila Prabhupada? Valar Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, ma'am.
Upadesamrita, the nectar of instruction. Srila Prabhupada's purpose and intent in presenting. Sri Rupa Goswami was the leader of all the Goswamis, and to guide our activities, he gave us this Upadesamrita, the nectar of instruction to follow. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left behind him the 8 verses known as Shishtastaka, Rupa Goswami gave us Upadesamrita so that we may become pure Vaishnavas. Everyone within this material world is engrossed in the mode of passion and ignorance. One must promote himself to the platform of goodness, Sattva Guna, by following the instructions of Rupa Goswami, and then everything concerning how to make further progress will be revealed. A follower of the Krishna consciousness movement should become a perfect Goswami. Unless one controls his senses and mind, one cannot become a Goswami. To achieve the highest success in life by becoming a Goswami and then a pure devotee of the Lord, one must follow the instructions known as Upadesamrita. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Valar Mataji. So there are few objectives intent by Srila Prabhupada to write this book. One he mentions is this book is especially meant for the practicing devotees to raise oneself from the lower modes of passion and ignorance to the platform of goodness. So there are certain do's and don'ts that have been given by Srila Rupa Goswami in terms of how do we understand the urges of the various senses, 6 urges, 6 principal urges, how to deal with those urges in our day-to-day practice to elevate ourselves in our Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada mentions that this particular qualification to control one's mind and the senses is one of the preliminary requirement of Krishna consciousness, because how much ever Krishna consciousness we understand in theory and principle, unless we practice them through the regulative principles that he has given to control our mind and senses, this practice will not be effective. Srila Prabhupada gives an analogy. It is just like, say, for example, we light a big fire sacrifice. But at the same time, while offering various ahutis, while offering their oblations to the fire, we keep pouring water on the fire sacrifice, all the offerings will become ineffective. Why? Because the fire will not be able to burn full-fledgedly if we keep pouring water. So if we are engaged in sense gratificatory activities, as Srila Rupa Goswami will explain shortly, then the practice of Krishna consciousness will not be effective. It will dampen the overall advancement of a devotee in his or her Krishna consciousness. So it's very, very important we understand these principles and apply them in our life. And yeah, there are few quotations by Srila Prabhupada. Shama Gopika Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Mataji.
Upadeshamrita, Srila Prabhupada's purpose and intent in presenting. Sri Rupa Goswami was the leader of all Goswamis, and to guide our activities, he gave us this Upadeshamrita, the nectar of instruction to follow. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left behind him the 8 verses known as Shikshastaka, Rupa Goswami gave us Upadeshamrita so that we may become pure Vaishnavas. The nectar of instruction has come out very nice. It is very important and must be immediately read by all devotees. In the near future, we shall introduce the Bhakti Shastri examination for the second initiation, and this shall be one of the required books of study. Anyone who reads it will immediately understand what Krishna consciousness is. Letter from Srila Prabhupada, 5th January 1976 to Radha Vallabh.
Thank you, Mataji. So one particular aspect you will find in Srila Prabhupada's instructions on nectar of devotion and nectar of instruction, which comes out very prominently. These books are primarily meant for practicing devotees, to make them into pure devotees. Srila Prabhupada is not mentioned. Of course, we still distribute these books even to the outside public. But most important application of these books is for the devotees who have already started practicing Krishna consciousness, to elevate them in their own Krishna consciousness, to make them pure Vaishnavas. So now we come to the overview of Sri Upadeshamrit. First text, it deals with the symptoms of the Madhyam Adhikari, how he controls the various urges of the senses, and we will see which are those urges. Then text 2 to 4, it deals with Madhyam Adhikari, external devotional practices, different practices which a Madhyam Adhikari engages in. Text 5 to 8, what is his internal vision? And final 3 texts, 9, 10, 11, they deal with various worshipable places, concluding with Sri Radha Kunda, the holiest of all places in the universe. So these comparisons are given in the last part of Nectar of Instruction. These chapters are very, very small and easy to read. You will relish them if we go through properly. These 11 chapters we will cover as part of the 5 sessions. First, we will cover preface and text 1, which talks about controlling the 6 urges. And then we will go into the practical aspects of dealing with the 6 urges, including 6 favorable activities we should indulge in for advancement in Krishna consciousness, and 6 unfavorable activities we have to be very careful of to avoid, that would dampen our advancement. Then the interaction, the relationship between the devotee, involving 6 kinds of loving exchanges between them. What should be one's attitude towards devotees at different levels? And finally, what is the highest stage of perfection in devotional service, and the conclusion. So this is how the flow will be for 5 lessons. So now let's go through the famous quote by Srila Prabhupada in the preface. Advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. So we will have this as the classroom activity. So we request devotees to maybe think for a minute or so, what do we understand by this particular statement of Srila Prabhupada, that if our attitude is not fully aligned to the mood and mission of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his students like the Goswamis, and our own founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, then although we may be engaged in devotional service, it will take very, very long time for us to make progress. So if you could think of any examples, either from our hearing or from our own personal life, as long as devotees are comfortable to share that, how we need to get our attitude right and aligned to the mood and mission. So maybe devotees can take a minute to think over this, and then we open up the floor for discussion.
Prabhu, can you please show the previous slide?
Sure, sure. Yes, Prabhuji. And I will also be uploading this on the Google Drive shared.
Thanks, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So maybe we start with Santosh Prabhu. Prabhu, please unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam to all. Prabhu, looking at this statement, one thing which comes to me is, it is always said that we take one step towards Krishna and Krishna takes 100 steps towards us. So that first step, we have to take it, Prabhu. So that endeavor to go towards Krishna is always ours, and then Krishna will take care of the rest. And secondly, in every moment, we have a choice. Either we have to serve our own body and senses or serve Krishna. So that also the choice, what we choose is our endeavor. With that, we can advance in Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Santosh Prabhu. So you basically mentioned that how various choices will still be available for us even when we spend time in Krishna consciousness, even when we advance, and at every moment we need to make proper choice to stay on this path, otherwise we will become lax. Is it correct, Santosh Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Santosh. Any other point? I saw few other devotees. Any other devotees would like to comment anything on this particular statement by Srila Prabhupada? What do we understand in our own life? Priyadarshini Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes,
My strong feeling is my own experience. Sustained endeavor is very important, Prabhuji. It has to be, whatever we do has to be continuing. Just starting sporadically at one time and then letting loose at the other times will not help us in succeed. So whatever we are doing, we have to be stable in our performances, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Mataji. Very important point, and we will see some of Srila Prabhupada's quotations in the next slide on this particular point, where Srila Prabhupada echoes similar sentiment that whatever endeavor we put, we cannot become lax. We have to remain sustained in our own effort. Then only we will stay at a particular point. Otherwise, we will, even if we decide to become stagnant in our own devotional service, Maya will pull us down. So we have to keep our endeavor sustained. Ramesh Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, the other thing which came to my mind is while doing the devotional service, right? Say, like usually in the morning, we spend our time in the devotional service, but rest of the day, say we should not actually do wrong things or commit any sins, and we should not adjust the say we'll do something and chalega, this is only a small bit, and then say let's adjust. Anyhow, I'm doing morning sadhana and everything, so Krishna will take care. So I think that attitude also we should not have, Prabhu.
Yes, correct. So what you are saying is Krishna consciousness has to be followed. The practices have to be followed throughout 24 hours of our activities, and not just during the morning sadhana, where we forget whatever the principles are, while in our day-to-day conduct we totally ignore, neglect and forget them. That won't help us. Whatever activities we conduct during our day will also influence our own practice and advancement. Thank you, Ramesh Prabhu. Shama Gopika Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. One thing is, like, we should not blame others and we should stay away from Vaishnava brothers, and we shouldn't be doing the prajalpa. And always whenever we hear something or we should always introspect ourselves. Are we applying that in our lives? And instead of like seeing in others' life whether they are applying or not.
Yes. So very important point. Introspection in our own lives is very, very important for a practicing devotee. Otherwise, Krishna consciousness will remain very, very superficial. And if we judge others, then it can have even a negative impact. If we are critical towards other devotees, so we should be, it said we should be very strict with oneself, but very lenient with others. Usually it is the other way around we follow. We are very lenient with ourselves and very strict with others. So that should not be the way. Thank you, Mataji, for the, so the main point here is introspection in our own lives. So maybe we'll have few more insights. Manas Raut Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Pranam.
Yes, Dandas Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. Actually, we should be very steady in practicing Krishna consciousness, number one. And the second thing is that we should be able to sacrifice something for the Krishna. And now and then we should be able to sacrifice like our sense of enjoyment. Sometime we have to devote for Krishna. And we have to sacrifice our day-to-day activities sometimes for Krishna. And that's my feeling.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So being steady and willing to sacrifice those things which are not favorable, as we will discuss in our subsequent discussions. Reena Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Pranams, Prabhuji. I want to share my experience, Prabhuji. During Corona time, when NND Prabhuji started this online courses, so that time, like I got the link of other two religious institutions, very famous religious institutions. Almost simultaneously I joined for all the three courses. But like this was very heart touching, Prabhuji, like it was very near to heart. Like after attending the classes, I used to get immense happiness. Like I was eagerly waiting, like when I will be attending the next class. So that's what happened, Prabhuji, like so that I continued in this, Prabhuji, like I left other two courses, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Mataji. And we will also see as part of one of Srila Prabhupada's quotes in the next slide, how he mentions that this initial test that is given by Krishna is the initial impetus, and it is up to us that we sustain that taste through our nice practice of Krishna consciousness. Thank you, Reena Mataji. So we'll read through some of the points which are mentioned here by devotees. Usha Mataji mentions we need to have faith and surrender to Krishna. Until we read the books by Srila Prabhupada, we cannot understand this movement. Until we understand the Krishna consciousness movement, we have no idea what to follow and what not to follow. Devotees have mentioned our recovery from the disease depends on the sincerity in following doctor's instructions. Yes, so doctors prescribe both the do's and the don'ts. So how sincerely we follow will determine how quickly we advanced. It is the follower who has to act, and his goal and mission is important. That is what the Acharya is telling us. All right, so let's see what are some of the statements by Srila Prabhupada on this. Any devotee would like to read through this loudly, clearly for everyone? Sujata Subhash Mataji. Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, ma'am.
Quote from our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada on the importance of one's attitude in Krishna consciousness. We have already come so far. We have turned our backs on materialistic values, shaved our heads, donned dhotis and tilaka. So why not go the whole way and surrender fully to Krishna? At least we should try for that. So Srila Prabhupada gave the example that if a student makes the effort to pass an exam in the top grade, he'll at least get a passing grade. But if he simply aims for a pass, he is likely to fail. This is from Srila Prabhupada in lecture dated 17 January 1971.
Thank you, Mataji. And Srila Prabhupada used to famously say, as part of the 4 pillars of religion against which the regulative principles are there, that if we like to gamble, why not gamble our life for Krishna, and we will never be disappointed. This one particular life, because if sense gratification has to be pursued, it is not going anywhere. Even if we feel that after spending this life in Krishna consciousness, maybe I lost something on enjoying my senses, I want to enjoy the senses, this opportunity will be available in any forms of life. That's what Srila Prabhupada is mentioning. But if we give this one life for Krishna, we will never be disappointed. And if we have anyway taken up to Krishna consciousness, then let's not take it half-heartedly or half-heartedly. We can give our full to perfect our life in this very lifetime. And Srila Prabhupada has mentioned this many times, that it is possible for a practicing devotee to start from scratch, from zero, and perfect our life in one lifetime itself. One need not wait for many lifetimes. Only then we will succeed. Otherwise, if our attitude is let it go and let's give a try, then we probably would need a very long time. And one more quote, Sujata Mataji, the second one also you can quote.
Often young brahmacharis, fresh from the grind of material life, are bursting with enthusiasm. But after some time, they may lose that freshness. So Srila Prabhupada noted that beginners in Krishna consciousness have a tendency to relax their efforts in a short time. But to advance spiritually, you must resist this temptation and continually increase your efforts and devotion. What
Thank
is
you.
SPL chapter 19?
This is Srila Prabhupada Leelamrit.
Leelamrita.
Yeah, so which is the autobiography of Srila Prabhupada. So it is explained, one particular example is given, just like, say, for example, we are standing in the river flow. Then a person mentions that, okay, I don't want to swim upstream because it is too tedious. I want to stand in one place. Srila Prabhupada explained that even to stand in one place in a flowing river will not be an easy task. One will have to apply force against the flow of water even to stay in one particular place. If one stops applying that effort, one will invariably get, flown along with the flow of water. One won't be able to sustain oneself in a given position. Similarly, in Krishna consciousness, we are always, Srila Prabhupada mentioned, we have announced war against Maya. So even to stay in one place, we have to be constantly fighting and putting our efforts to fight out against Maya. Otherwise, we will be flown just like the river flow in Maya's flow. So we will have one last point by Srila Prabhupada. Reena Mataji, would you like to read?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, ma'am.
So, quotes from our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada on importance of one's attitude in Krishna consciousness. Young brahmacharis are usually trained strictly in the beginning, but after being in the movement a few years, when they become a little mature in devotional service, the pressure is often relaxed. It may be that no one is pushing them to surrender or to follow the temple programs diligently. At that time, the devotee's spiritual advancement will depend to a much greater extent on his own determination to apply himself to the process of Krishna consciousness. It is required that devotees become spiritually grown up, make a commitment to stay in this movement and to go on practicing Krishna consciousness no matter what, and always endeavor to become an advanced devotee. Without sincere endeavor in devotional service, one cannot obtain love of Godhead. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela, 24th chapter, 171.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
So I'll give one particular example from a very day-to-day life of a practicing devotee, how even the advanced souls, and that's why they are advanced, they show through their own example how one should be very much diligent in practicing the temple programs. You would have heard name, or if you Google, you will also search one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples who passed away, who departed from this world in 2009-2010. His Holiness Mahavishnu Goswami Maharaj. That he was such an amazing devotee and such a bright example of how one should be very diligent in practicing the practices of Krishna consciousness, including rising early, chanting during Brahma Muhurta, never missing out on Mangalarti. That in Maharaj's last days, when he was admitted to Bhaktivedanta Hospital in Mumbai, of course, because of Maharaj's advanced age, he was around 90 plus. So the body was slowly crumbling. But still, every early morning at 4:15, he used to start tapping the devotees who were accompanying him in the hospital and taking care of Maharaj's needs. He used to start pushing them and tapping on the bed to wake them up, saying that it is time for Mangalarti. And he used to make devotees sing Mangalarti around him so as to remember those prayers by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. That means even in his last very fake end of the life, when the body is not cooperating, Maharaj did not give the reason that, I can miss Mangalarti now. Similarly, there is a mention in a book, one of the books which is written on him, when the temple in Dwarka, ISKCON temple in Dwarka was getting built, the property was under construction. One time there was a huge flooding, and because of the flooding, devotees in the building used to stay on the first floor, and the temple hall was under construction on the ground floor. So devotees thought that anyway the ground floor is flooded with water, so the Mangalarti cannot happen today. But when they started hearing the noise of somebody singing, they curiously came down, and in the west deep water, Maharaj was the only one standing and singing the Mangalarti prayers, and the devotees felt very embarrassed that our spiritual master is so eager that early in the morning he has gotten ready, and even in the west deep water he is offering these prayers to the spiritual master. And immediately then other devotees started joining him. So the point is, it is not that after we spend some time in Krishna consciousness, we become little mature, we become relaxed in our practices. We have to go on till our very last breath with practicing Krishna consciousness diligently. And this sincere endeavor will then, it may please Guru and Gauranga, and then we may be taken seriously by Krishna. Without sincere endeavor in devotional service, the love of Godhead is not a cheap thing. Definitely, we have to work really hard and sincerely for it. An easygoing life and attainment of perfection in transcendental realization cannot go together. So, Srila Prabhupada writes at another place, the process of Krishna consciousness is very simple, but the application is very difficult. That means it is not that the process is complex to follow, difficult to follow, not at all. But where things get difficult is when we become lax in our own focus and in our own efforts. So we cannot have a life of sense enjoyment going in parallel with Krishna consciousness and expect for oneself to advance. So we proceed. Now we have completed the preface. As part of the preface, we saw the position of Srila Rupa Goswami for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the meaning of the term Rupanuga. We also saw some of the prayers from the Mangalacharan prayers, how the Rupanuga term is also used to glorify some of our existing acharyas. And we also saw the purpose and intent for Srila Prabhupada to write Bhakti Rasamrut Sindhu, which is mainly meant for the practicing devotees to elevate ourselves in our day-to-day practice of Krishna consciousness to the platform of goodness and advance in one's Krishna consciousness. So now we will recite the first text. Any devotee would like to recite this text in Shama Gopika Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Vacho vegam manasa krodha vegam jihva vegam udaro pashta vegam etan veganyo vishaheta dhira sarvamapi mam prithavim sasishya. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Manoj. So basically this verse is talking about the 6 various urges, which are those Vacho Vegam, the urge to speak, Manasa Vegam, the urge of the mind, and we will see these in detail. The anger, third one, Jiva, the tongue, the urge of Udara, one's belly, and Upastha means the genital, the procreatory organs. How a practicing devotee has to constantly deal with all these 6 urges and the workarounds based on Krishna consciousness process. So in the beginning of this particular discussion, Srila Prabhupada quotes Maharaj Parikshit from Srimad Bhagavatam. There is a inquiry by Maharaj Parikshit to Shukadev Goswami. Now, in the interest of time, we won't recite the verse, but we'll check the translation. Parikshit Maharaj is asking about the process of atonement, how it is not helpful unless the core mentality to commit that sinful activity is rectified. He mentions, one may know that sinful activity is injurious for him because he actually sees that a criminal is punished by the government and rebuked by people in general, and because he hears from scriptures and learned scholars that one is thrown into hellish conditions in the next life for committing sinful acts. Nevertheless, in spite of such knowledge, one is forced to commit sins again and again, even after performing acts of atonement. Therefore, what is the value of such atonement? Sometimes one who is very alert so as not to commit sinful acts is victimized by sinful life again. I therefore consider this process of repeated sinning and atoning to be useless. It is like the bathing of an elephant, for an elephant cleanses itself by taking a full bath, but then throws dust over its head and body as soon as it returns to the land. So Parikshit Maharaj, basically the background to this is in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, various hellish planets are mentioned by Srila Shukadev Goswami, and Maharaj Parikshit is very anxious how the common people can protect themselves from this difficult destiny of having to reach one of these sinful destinations, the hellish planets, how they can save themselves. So in order to answer this particular inquiry by Maharaj Parikshit, Shukadev Goswami is first suggesting the process of atonement. That means prayashchitta, that one atones for the sins that one has committed to relieve oneself of the sinful reactions. But Parikshit Maharaj contest this particular suggestion by Srila Shukadev Goswami by saying, how does it help? Because you are counteracting the sinful reactions and committing the sinful activities again. And he gives the example of an elephant bathing. As soon as the elephant has cleansed its body, he goes out of the river on the river bank and rolls himself in the mud or the sand. That means the whole body again becomes dirty. So what is the meaning of the bath which he has just taken? It is of no use. And there are examples given. So there are examples given by Srila Prabhupada of a thief. Many a times the thief knows that if he gets caught, he will be punished very, very severely. Not only that, he has also seen another thieves committing theft, getting caught and being punished by the law. Still the thief is not able to keep himself aloof from this tendency to steal. Or another classic example we see in our own life, you see any of the cigarette packets, based on the regulations that exist in various countries, most of the countries, they require the cigarette companies, the tobacco companies, to write a very bold message on top of the cigarette packet with very grievous consequences, showing the various types of cancers and all, very ghastly photos of people getting cancer as a result of consuming these tobacco products. But do you think that the smokers in any way get reluctant to smoke by looking at these pictures? Not at all. So if atonement itself or knowing the consequences itself would be sufficient for a person to give up the sinful tendency, then these issues would not have recurred. But Parikshit Maharaj says that it is not sufficient. So what is the workaround that is given in the scriptures? The workaround is to follow a life of Yukta Ahara Viharasya, a regulated life of hygiene and rules and regulations, which Srila Prabhupada mentions that if one is fortunate to associate with a pure devotee, then he can surpass all the practices for controlling the mind by the mystic yoga process, simply by following the regulative process principles of Krishna consciousness. And this we see in the life of the hippies who were addicted to breaking all the 4 types of regulative principles, And just because of their association with Srila Prabhupada, they were able to give up those sinful lives. What to speak of Srila Prabhupada in person? There have been examples of so many devotees, and many of them, even in our discussion today, even in our present session, we have many devotees revealing previously how they were used to consuming non-vegetarian foods and very fond of such things. But just by taking up to Krishna consciousness, by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, associating with devotees, they develop total distaste for these sinful activities by engaging in the service of the Lord and the devotees under the direction of the bona fide representative spiritual master. So this is the process recommended, Krishna consciousness as a workaround process and not prayaschitta, because prayaschitta can help one deal with the reactions, but one cannot be saved from committing the sinful activities again. One will still be forced. In fact, this question is also raised by Arjun to Lord Krishna in 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where he says that, my dear Lord, sometimes a person, even unwilling, is forced to commit the sinful activity. And what is that reason for that? And Krishna mentions it is lust, which causes the conditioned living being to commit sinful activities again and again. And Krishna gives the workaround for that lust as abhyasena tu kaunteya. By having a constant practice of principles of Krishna consciousness, one can deal with this problem. So any devotees have any comment or any inputs to share on this particular point of how the material workarounds of either giving the consequences of the actions or performing this process of prayaschitta, they have their own limitations. Any devotees would like to share anything on this? Ramesh Prabhu, you have raised your hand. You want to share anything on this?
No, Hare Krishna Prabhu, it was for the last one, Prabhu.
All right, that's fine. Sujata Mataji, Hare Krishna.
No, Prabhuji, it's not there.
Right. Shama Gopika Mataji, yes, Mataji.
Yeah, Prabhuji, in Nectar of Devotion also we have read that, if a person is doing a sinful activity but is not engaged in the devotional service, then the sinful desires still are present within him. So the sinful desires have not been removed. That is why he tends to perform the sinful activity again. So the example that is given is like of Jamila. So he had that sinful desire which got triggered after seeing the prostitute. So yeah, so that is the thing.
Thank you, Mataji. And we also saw so many graphic examples from Srila Prabhupada's life, like the crazy Peter, who was so addicted to drugs and intoxication, and simply by associating with the devotees, by following Srila Prabhupada's instructions, he became into such a wonderful devotee Vaishnava, Kusha Kritha Prabhu, and contributed so much to the Vaishnava mission. And I also recollect during my initial days as a student, when I was staying in base, getting up early in the morning was so difficult because I had the habit of going late either for studies and other things. But I had desire to also associate with devotees during the Brahma Muhurta, participate in chanting. So few times I used to sleep at the entrance to the temple hall in the base flat, that devotees won't cross over my body, at least to wake me up. They will at least not to cross over my body, they will wake myself up to go and sleep in a different place. But then it used to happen that many a time they used to wake me up, and still the sleep tendency was so strong that I used to go and sleep in a different room. So but then the in charge devotee there, he appreciated that at least you are putting the effort and Krishna will slowly help you with this. So even from our side, we should never be discouraged, even if we are conditioned by some of our past conditioning, as long as we have a sincere desire to pick ourselves up and grow in Krishna consciousness, Srila Prabhupada, Krishna will definitely help us as long as we are sincere. So we have few comments by, okay, so Aishwarya Subhadra Mataji has given the example of Mrugari, yes, who was indulging in very ghastly activity of half killing the animal and deriving pleasure by seeing them die a very painful death. And by the association of Narad Muni, he was able to give up that sinful tendency mentality. So let me just share the attendance link 1 second. Okay, attendance link shared. Now we proceed. I guess we are lagging slightly today, so let's try to see how we can pick up. Yes. So can we think of any example? Sorry, I forgot to show this from the scriptures of, so one example we just saw, which is a classic example quoted by Aishwarya Subhadra Mataji, or that of Mrugari, who was completely addicted to the sinful life, and how his sinful mentality was corrected by engaging in the service given by Narad Muni. Who was thief but couldn't restrain? Yes. So yeah, this is the example, Reena Mataji. I believe you are quoting the example which was quoted by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that there was once a thief and who started associating with the devotees and went for one yatra. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati explains that because of his previous conditioning of wanting to steal, he was finding it very, very difficult to give up that tendency even when he was in the association of the devotees. So what he did, he put the bags, I think not bags, the clothings of one devotee in place of another, and he just swapped the clothings. And in the morning when the devotees got up, there was all confusion because they couldn't find their respective outfits where they had put it for drying. And but Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to give this example to say how these tendencies are very, very strong. But at least good thing is that thief is in the devotee association. So slowly Krishna will himself take upon the task of cleaning the heart of such a devotee. We don't have to do any other. Yes. So one devotee has just quoted the example of Jagai and Madai, Shama Gopika Mataji. So this was also another example which I had thought, how Jagai and Madai, they were coming from such sinful background, and when they asked Nityananda Prabhu how they can repent their sinful activities, they were very, very repentant. The workaround given, the solution given by Sri Nityananda Prabhu was that of to serve the Vaishnavas by building the ghat on the bank of the Ganges, where devotees can come and comfortably take their bath in Ganges. And Jagai and Madhai, they sincerely engaged in building what is known today as Madhai Ghat. So this is another classic example of how Krishna consciousness is very effective in clearing all the sinful tendencies, all the conditionings in a living entity, provided we are sincere. So we proceed. If anybody has any questions, comments, we can take it. If not, we will proceed. So then Srila Rupa Goswami and in the purport, Srila Prabhupada starts covering all the 6 urges that have been given by Srila Rupa Goswami one by one. First one is Vacho Vegam. Vacho Vegam is controlling the urge to speak. Now, in the interest of time, we won't exactly go through all the quotes, but we will discuss through the workaround that is given by Srila Prabhupada. So this Vacho Vegam, the urge to speak, Srila Prabhupada writes very nicely that what does it mean? It also manifests itself in so many conferences, modern day societies to discuss material issues, and even the modern day newspapers and the magazines. Srila Prabhupada mentions it's all, and even the novels, it is all due to the urge to speak. Why? Because a conditioned living entity naturally has got this mentality to speak around everything that is not relevant to Krishna, and thus waste one time. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport the analogy with a toad. A toad is very fond of making a croaking sound, but through this sound, what the toad is able to do is just to attract the attention of a snake, because the snake comes to know based on the toad's sound that where is my prey, and then the snake slowly approaches the toad from behind and eats it. It captures it and puts it to death. So similarly, this Prajalpa or Gramya Katha, any idle talks which are not relevant to Krishna consciousness, they simply also attract death in the life of a conditioned soul. So one should always be very careful about avoiding. And to explain this, Srila Prabhupada quotes two verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, which come in instruction of Narad Muni to Srila Vyasadeva. So in the first verse, he mentions that the words that do not glorify the Lord, they are simply like the pilgrimages which attract the crows, the places of pilgrimage for a crows, where the crows get attracted to the place of garbage. So similarly, where the non-devotees get attracted to, like you will find so many platforms in the modern day and age. You know, few years back we had Orkut, now then we had Facebook, then we have WhatsApp, and so many social media platforms. Although also there are question and answers platforms like Reddit and Quora, and most of the topics that get discussed on these platforms, you will find that 99% topics, they are not relevant for how to improve one's destination in the next life, or how to improve the quality of one's this life, but simply discussion about what happened in this celebrity's life and what is our opinion in what is happening around the world, which is totally a idle talk, which simply distracts our mind from Krishna consciousness. On the other hand, Srila Narad Muni mentions those compositions, those writings which may be incorrectly composed, which may have deficiencies in them in terms of grammatical errors, in terms of other linguistic demerits or limitations, but still those compositions are relished, are sung, and are shared between the sadhavas, between the great devotees. So this is a very important verse. So we will just recite it once. Tadvad visargo janataga viplavo yasmin pratishlokam abhaddhavatyapi namani anantasya yasho ankitani yat shunvanti gayanti grunanti sadhavaha. So in this verse, Narad Muni is saying not one verse, but every verse of this composition, Prati Shlokam, is Abhaddhavatyapi. Abhaddha means it is imperfectly composed, considering the grammatical errors, linguistic errors, and all that. But there is one good quality. What is that quality? Namani Anantasya Yasho Ankitani. Those compositions are glorifying the name, form, and the success, the yasha of Supreme Lord. Then such compositions are definitely relished, shared, and sung by the sadhava, by the purified men, by the devotees of the Lord. So we are not bothered about referring to so-called sophisticated and very perfect writings if they don't deal with glorification of the Lord. On the other hand, glorification of the Lord, even if it is imperfectly composed, still it is very, very purifying. And Srila Prabhupada quotes this verse in the introduction to his writing of Srimad Bhagavatam, saying that based on this particular criteria given by Srila Narada Muni, we hope that this, our humble attempt to present Srimad Bhagavatam, is accepted by the society for the upliftment of the overall mankind. So of course that he writes out of his humility, but that is the compositions which attracts the devotees. So the panacea, the mitigation to this vacho vegam, controlling the urge to speak idle talks, is Krishna Katha. We can engage ourselves in as much as possible speaking about Krishna, and it doesn't matter how much we know, it is the conviction and how thoroughly we study Srila Prabhupada's books. Like I was quoting about one great devotee, Srila Mahavishnu Goswami Maharaj, a while ago. In one of his talks, he also recently, I saw one of his talks on his disappearance day celebration, where he mentions that one can take one verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, whichever one likes. Say, for example, this, study it very thoroughly and try to explain just one point that one understands by reading this verse, and that will be a perfect preaching. As long as what we are talking is consistent with the message of our founder Acharya. So one doesn't need to be a Pandita knowing too many verses or too many philosophical concepts. Then next verse, next urge spoken by Srila Rupa Goswami is that of Manovegam, controlling the restlessness, fickleness of the mind. So this Srila Prabhupada explains that if we feel our mind by Krishna, with Krishna, then there is no possibility of the mind being agitated by Maya's influence. To try to create a vacuum in the mind is artificial, as it is practiced by some of the modern day philosophers. We don't want to quote any, but in order to avoid the distraction of the mind, some of the philosophies, they dictate focusing the mind either on the zero or trying to relinquish all the desires from the mind. But Srila Prabhupada writes in Bhagavad Gita, it is not possible to relinquish all the desires from the mind. Rather, we have to fill mind with talks of Krishna. And that's why that is also one of the purpose he mentions why he has written Krishna book, so that one will fall in love with Krishna after reading the pastimes of Lord Krishna, and our mind will naturally be controlled from the idleness. So controlling the restless and fickleness of the mind, any example often quoted by Srila Prabhupada on this? Any example any devotees recollect which Srila Prabhupada quotes in terms of controlling one's mind by Krishna consciousness? Anyone? Let me give you a hint if you want. Srila Prabhupada talks about controlling the senses, how one particular great mystic performed lot of tapasyas, austerities, but still had difficulties on few occasions in controlling the senses. On the other hand, other devotee of the Lord who was throughout engaged in.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Amrish Maharaj and
Amrish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni.
Durvasa Muni.
Yes, thank you, Adish Prabhu. And somehow coincidence that many devotees have quoted this example even on the chat. So I guess it's a very prominent example. How Durvasa Muni was a great mystic yogi, and compared to the Varnashram system, he was situated on a higher platform compared to Amrish Maharaj, who was a householder. But still, when it came to the focus of the mind on Krishna, we see that Durvasa Muni fell well short, and he was tempted by his lower tendencies of anger in misunderstanding Amrish Maharaj and trying to give a punishment which was lot excess than even what was the apparent error in judgment according to him. But we see Amrish Maharaj, it is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam, he did not budge even an inch, and that not moving even an inch, not based on the overconfidence, it was based on his complete faith in Krishna, that if Krishna wants to let me be vanquished, then fine, I will remember him and will get vanquished by this demon. But if Krishna wants to save me, then nothing wrong can happen. So this is one classic example. Yeah, so Rohini Mataji has mentioned the example of Prahlad Maharaj, who was so focused on his meditation on Lord Vishnu, that even when his father and his agents offered him poison to drink, Prahlad Maharaj could see Lord in it and nothing happened to him. Similarly, Aishwarya Subhadra Mataji has given another classic example which Srila Prabhupada quotes of Srila Haridas Thakur versus Vishwamitra, that Vishwamitra was such a advanced yogi and trying to control his senses by performing austerities in a very severe circumstances for a long time, and still he had distractions by some of the damsels from the heavenly planets, whereas Srila Haridas Thakur, apparently being born in a family which was not part of Varnashram system, just by the constant focus and remembrance on the holy names of the Lord, he was able to even subjugate the illusory energy of the Lord into submission. And Maya herself took initiation from Srila Haridas Thakur. So this is the second urge of Manovegam, of controlling one's fickle mind by feeding it in Krishna consciousness. Actually, there is one more example, day-to-day life example, which I often quote on this topic, that a child who is typically wanting to eat chalk or typically wanting to eat dirt in young age, the doctor's diagnosis typically is some of the nutrients lacking within the child's body, and they recommend that probably calcium is lacking, because of which the child is eating this and this substance, or because of which child is eating dirt. So if we properly nourish the child with those nutrients, then even when these other lower forms of what he perceives as the food come in front of it, the child will not have the tendency to eat them. It is only because of deficiency. So we should understand it is only because we are not feeling ourselves sufficiently enough with Krishna consciousness that the mind wanders in so many directions, wanting to enjoy the lower pleasures. So we have to fill our mind with Krishna. So Reena Mataji has mentioned example of Draupadi, how she was constantly focused on remembering Krishna, even when she was in the most difficult circumstance. So we proceed. So we saw Vacho Vegam, the urge to speak, urges of the mind, fickle mind. Then next is Krodha Vegam, controlling the anger. And this is one of the very, very difficult and most dangerous of the anarthas, because anger has the potency to destroy the things in minimum time, right? Even if, say, for example, of course, we are not saying that other anarthas are better or good, but the destructive power of anger is huge. If it is not controlled properly, it can basically, I have seen even in the relationships, even in the corporate world, months and years of hard work, anger has the potency to destroy all of that in one single moment if one is not careful about controlling it or handling it. So Srila Prabhupada mentions that we cannot stop anger altogether. First of all, this is the quality of the lower modes of nature as given in 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So we have to be very careful in handling this even as devotees. But the positive side of it is we should strictly engage it whenever only Lord Krishna or his representatives, the devotees of the Lord, are being insulted or reduced in their importance, then we can deploy it. And Srila Prabhupada gives example of Sri Hanumanji burning Lanka in anger when Sita Mata was captured by Ravana and held captured, and Arjuna deploying his anger to fight in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, because Hare Krishna, because no battle can be fought without one being angry. And there is also one quotation by one remembrance by Radhanath Swami Maharaj of Srila Prabhupada being very angry with a so-called scholar of philosophy who had come to visit him in Pennsylvania. And of course, Srila Prabhupada didn't speak with him much, but there was very gravity in voice of Srila Prabhupada. You can read this at your leisure, that this professor on Hinduism in America was brought by devotees to meet Srila Prabhupada, and he had also brought in his students to accompany him. And this professor was trying to show off his understanding in front of Srila Prabhupada by saying that, Swamiji, how come there are so many contradictions in the writings of so many acharyas? And Srila Prabhupada didn't try to cover his answer by a very flowery language. Srila Prabhupada was very grave and stern, gave a very stern look at this professor and told him there are no contradictions amongst acharyas. And this professor was taken aback by Srila Prabhupada. He didn't even greet him with a flowery thing, because Srila Prabhupada didn't appreciate this particular conclusion by the professor as the first level of their conversation, and he didn't compromise. So devotees also became very afraid that Srila Prabhupada was in a very grave mood. And this professor started, then there was a silence for some time, and the students started looking at their professor by, in a way that, my dear sir, at least defend yourself slightly. Swamiji is completely based on his own conviction, has not allowed to put forth your point. He started giving some supporting evidence, and Srila Prabhupada was again very heavy in defeating that misunderstanding, saying there are no contradictions amongst acharyas in terms of writings, in terms of giving the principles of Krishna consciousness. So we see devotees of the Lord, they are very mild and tolerant and amicable as far as tolerating insults for themselves are concerned. But when it comes to defending the Siddhanta, defending the principles of Krishna consciousness, defending Krishna or his representatives, they are strong like fire. They don't compromise. And Santosh Prabhu has mentioned, yes, this is the example. Srila Prabhupada also quotes in this particular text one purport of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu being angry like a red hot copper on Jagai and Madhai when he came to know that they hurt Nityananda Prabhu, and even Nityananda Prabhu started bleeding. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very, very upset. So thank you, Prabhuji, for sharing this. So Vacho Vegam, Manasa, Krodha Vegam. We saw the three urges. Fourth urges, they relate with the different parts of the body which are in the same line. Jiva Vegam, Udara, Upastha Vegam. So Jiva Vegam and Udara Vegam have been explained by Srila Prabhupada in a joint manner, in a combined manner. The urges of the tongue and the belly. So again, there are multiple statements, very applicable and practical statement by Srila Prabhupada in the purport in Nectar of Instruction, which you can go through at your leisure. But some of the important points we have listed here. So any devotee would like to read through this? Hare Krishna. Ramesh Prabhu. Ramesh Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes.
Jiva Vegam, Udara Vegam, controlling the demands of tongue, belly. One should not allow the tongue to eat according to its choice, but should control the tongue by supplying prasada. One should take prasad at scheduled times and should not eat in restaurants or sweetmeat shops simply to satisfy the whims of the tongue or belly. Eating for sense gratification, including the use of extra quantities of spices like chili and tamarind, is to be given up by Krishna conscious persons. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught us to avoid very palatable dishes even while eating prasada. If we offer palatable dishes to the deity with the intention of eating such nice food, we are involved in trying to satisfy the demands of the tongue. If we accept the invitation of a rich man with the idea of receiving palatable food, we are also trying to satisfy the demands of the tongue. If we observe fasting days like Ekadashi and Janmashtami, we can restrain the demands of the belly. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So many important points Srila Prabhupada is giving here. And of course, these points are not meant for, outside people. These are meant for practicing devotees. So don't present them as it is and push a person away from Krishna. Because initially when the people used to come to Krishna consciousness, Srila Prabhupada used to encourage them to have Krishna Prasadam as much as possible, even up to their neck, so that they will be purified. But gradually, as the devotees advanced in Krishna consciousness, Srila Prabhupada gave them these principles that how even in Prasadam, we should be very careful in not to overindulge in having a very opulent type of Prasadam, because we will have issue with controlling the senses, which we'll see subsequently, including one should not be fond of having a very spicy type of food, which has lot of chili, salt or tamarind, all these substances. One will have problem with the sense control. Otherwise, not only sense control, one will also have problem with other vegas, including anger, managing anger and all that, if the food that we consume is not in the mode of goodness. Prasadam is definitely in the mode of pure goodness, but since we are not honoring it in that mood 100%, we will be affected by the quality if we are not careful. And the positive engagement Srila Prabhupada mentions, one should be very regulated in the times when we have our food. One should try to have as much as sattvic food, and on the special days like Ekadashi, Janmashtami, appearance, disappearance of the Lord and his representatives, we can fast. That will be very nice. And not only, we have discussed this some time back, fasting has not just been mentioned in the scriptures. Even some of the modern day scientists, recent, like few years back, two Japanese scientists, they got a Nobel because of their thesis on the benefits to the body by fortnightly fasting. And Ekadashi anyway falls on fortnightly basis. So 90% of the chances of cancer get reduced. That is their finding, not Srila Prabhupada's writing. So it has benefits both for the body as well as for our advancement in Krishna consciousness. Any devotees have any comment on this? If not, we proceed. So I guess we are slightly lagging. Yeah. So this is the last of the Vegas. So we saw the demands of the Vacha, the speech, mind, and anger as the first three demands. And last three demands are that of the tongue, belly, and the procreatory organ or the genitals. So here it is mentioned, in a similar manner, the urges of the genitals, the sex impulse, can be controlled when not used unnecessarily. The genitals should be used to beget a Krishna conscious child. Otherwise, they should not be used. The Krishna consciousness movement encourages marriage not for the satisfaction of the genitals, but for begetting of Krishna conscious children. Many such Krishna conscious children are required, and one who is capable of bringing forth Krishna conscious offsprings is allowed to utilize his genitals. So here also it is mentioned, as well as in the talks by various senior devotees in our movement, that the flourishing Krishna conscious societies, congregations, the devotees are encouraged to have even 3 or more children, provided, of course, one can train them in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, just indulging our senses for one's own sense gratification, especially this particular point has been stressed by Srila Prabhupada in Bhagavad Gita so many places as the very, very prominent reason for a person to be entangled in this material world. So as a practicing devotees, we have to be very careful in, and this is not just the external indulgence, even the indulgence of the mind. You read through Srila Prabhupada's writing in Nectar of Instruction, first verse purport, you will find Srila Prabhupada explaining even subtleties of this, how one can be engaged in this even at the level of one's mind, which is also very dangerous for a person wanting to advance in Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna, Prabhu, as a Grahastha and neophyte devotee, what is the ideal for practicing devotees? We cannot come to the standard of the Acharyas in the, yeah. So this is again mentioned, see, if you take a particular book on Vaishnava etiquette, even this point is mentioned there. What is, I don't want to reveal the identity of the devotee because this is a practical question and nobody should feel embarrassed by this. But as per the standards given by Srila Prabhupada, we should be aware what is our founder Acharya has mentioned. First of all, we should not indulge in any artificial means to avoid conception. This is one. Second is the relationship between in a husband and wife in a family. According to Srila Prabhupada, basically as mentioned, it should be in a regulated manner. It should be for the begetting of the children. And the frequency as mentioned is in a, of course, in the young age and all, when one is capable of begetting the children, it should be around once a month. But even that, we should chant the required number of rounds that have been mentioned by Srila Prabhupada, so that the child, the soul that we attract in the womb of the mother is of that quality. Otherwise, we would also simply be begetting children like Diti. Okay. So any devotees have any question? Adish Prabhu, yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, how to maintain celibacy?
By regularly associating with devotees and hearing from various devotees. There are few devotees even in our movement who have given extensive talks on this particular topic. Like just to name a few, there is a wonderful series of classes, 7 lectures by His Holiness Jai Advaita Swami Maharaj, which are entitled The Hopes and Horrors of Family Life. One one who is aspiring to get into Grahastha ashram, or even those who are already in Grahastha ashram, can hear through this, where Maharaj very meticulously analyzes the dangers for a family man if one is not careful, even as a devotee. So one should be, it's not that we are in Krishna consciousness, that means license is given to deal with it the way we want. We will have a lot of trouble, even a practicing devotee. So we can take this guidance, and also for the specific to the youngsters, like the unmarried boys as well as unmarried girls, there are separate series of sessions by various devotees, like Prabhujis for the boys and Matajis for the girls, which can be referred to in this. But this is a very high level details I'm giving. Details can be discussed in one-on-one discussions to share some of. But whatever is available in the public platform, only that I'm sharing here.
Okay, the series name is The Horrors and
The Hopes and Horrors of Family Life.
Okay, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Of classes. Also, there is a wonderful book written by His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami Maharaj, Brahmacharya in Krishna Consciousness. So, and Maharaj writes in the introduction to these books that it is not just meant for the unmarried boys and the girls, it is also meant for the grahasthas who are in the grahastha ashram, how one should lead a very regulated life. So we have many of these guidances available in our society. Hare Krishna.
Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Now we conclude our discussion today with this quote by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So we will request Reena Mataji, who had earlier raised her hand, to read. Would you like to read, Mataji?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Mataji.
Conclusion, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's commentary in Anuvritti. Our material identification creates three kinds of urges: the urge to speak, the urge or demands of the mind, and the demands of the body. When a living entity falls victim to these three types of urges, his life becomes inauspicious. One who practices resisting these demands or urges is called tapasvi, or one who practices austerities. By such tapasya, one can overcome victimization by the material energy, the external potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Mataji. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj here is explaining how, if we indulge in this urge, it is not that we are deriving happiness, maybe on an immediate basis, yes, but ultimately it would lead to frustration and our whole life will become inauspicious. And those devotees who just asked the question on the chat, I would like to assure that be rest assured, if we are engaged in vibrant Krishna consciousness, if we are keeping our Krishna consciousness practicing it very diligently, both for ourselves and our family, whatever so-called insecurities we may have in terms of having a very healthy family life, Krishna will provide so much fulfillment in each and every person's heart that one will not find anything lacking. And of course, Krishna consciousness is not against relationship, which is according to proper dharma. Krishna himself mentions dharma aviruddheshu, that he is the sex life which is as per the Vedic religious principles. But we need to have regulation, for which we can discuss separately based on guidance available. But if we follow this properly, the family life will be the happiest. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur used to call his family that as soon as I visit home, I feel no difference between the home and the Vaikuntha, because everybody is so nicely practicing Krishna consciousness. So if we also want to have our family as Vaikuntha, we need to implement these principles. Yeah, repeat the names of the books. So the name of the book, I will just put it for everybody. But again, any book I am quoting, which have been written by any author apart from Srila Prabhupada, the reading of those books stands over and above reading Srila Prabhupada's books. Okay, so it should not happen one start reading any book we are mentioning without giving proper audience to Srila Prabhupada's books. So let me mention it here. Brahmacharya in Krishna Consciousness by His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami Maharaj. And Hopes and Horrors of Family Life lecture series by Joy. Okay, so with this we conclude our discussion, and this group activity, just to be fair, we will have it next time, so we don't need to rush through. So we'll start with this group activity next time, next session. Okay, any devotees have any comments, questions based on the discussion? Many of these points, many a time devotees may not find comfortable to open up, but we request whoever devotee you feel comfortable with, feel free to clarify on this, because these are given by Srila Rupa Goswami for practicing devotees, for us to advance in Krishna consciousness. And please, everybody do get the hard copy of this book. It's very small but very important, Nectar of Instruction. Hare Krishna. Anybody has any comments? If not, we conclude. So I would just, Mangala